try to do today, even though I will be switching around views a little bit, is try not to do it too quickly. So if you think I've sort of fallen asleep, that's probably because I'm going round in circles a little. Excuse me while I drink my morning coffee. Okay, so I didn't want to do another hour. I found the last one quite long, particularly as the number of attendees was too small to have a discussion or debate, so it just ended up being a bit of a lecture, and I don't want this to turn into a lecture, so what this one will be is simply a little bit of a demo. If you've looked at any of the material before, or if you've watched the previous recording, you'll know that I've tried to base my look at serious mobile games around one particular example, and it's one that we've been developing at Massey University for, well, over 2 years now, in fact, with a series of sort of mini projects. And if it was still the first version of the game, I certainly wouldn't be using it for this, because that was a game that only worked in one place and really was of no use to anybody else. But what we've been trying to do, and I think been reasonably successful in over the last couple of years, is gradually moving the game into much more of a reusable framework. And what I wanted to do was first of all explain how the current game can be very easily reused by anybody, and once we've done that, look at how we might progress things a little further. Because if there's something I hoped to get out of the MOOC was first of all somebody perhaps trying the game out as it is, but also getting some ideas for how we can make it better in the future. So with that in mind, what I'd like to do is go to the MOOC page, and I'll explain how you can set up the game yourself using the materials that have been provided. I did touch on this a bit in the last talk, but today I'm going to specifically work through what you would do if you wanted to try this game out, and then I'm hoping that some of you might do that. Just need to pick the right page. Now, as I said, I need to be a bit aware of the fact that there seems to be a bit of a lag, so I'm trying not to race through things. So I'm just going to pause, find the right part of the page, just pause for a moment and leave it there and not try to move on too quickly. So what I've got in front of me, and possibly you have as well, is the page from the MOOC wiki, about halfway down the games page where it says the Mobile Business Consulting game. Oh no, I didn't share my desktop. Oh, see, I thought I'd learned, but clearly I didn't now. Okay, so I want to share my desktop. Screen sharing. Okay, so I forgot that I have to do a separate thing to do screen sharing. It will start in a moment. Okay, I'm going to share my desktop now. Right, apparently it's being shared, so with that in mind, I'll take that out of the way and go to where I was before, which is here. So I hope you can see that, my view, which is the Mobile Business Consulting game part of the wiki. And I'll just walk through the resources. The original game that we did was using Java Micro Edition, and I did put that up on SourceForge, really more as a sort of a legacy thing. I'm aware that really Java Micro Edition is yesterday's technology, and so it's really up there for interest, and in fact we do get quite a few people downloading it, but you know, it's got a limited platform. It runs on sort of Nokia S60s, and that's about it. So really the important thing is what we're working with at the moment, which is the Android version, and I haven't put that up on SourceForge yet. I'm a bit reluctant to put the source code up until I'm happy that, you know, it's actually a usable open source project, and there's still a few things that I think need ironing out before it really goes up on SourceForge, but it will do, and certainly I will just put the download file up on SourceForge very soon, even if I don't put up the source code. So in terms of the file itself, there's a zip file here, the mobile game download, and if you download that, it basically consists of two things. One is the APK file, which is the installable application, and the other is the data that's inside it. I'll come back to that, because the data that's inside it is the configurable data that you can change yourself. Now, if you want to install on Android devices, we haven't put it up on the store or anything, so what we suggest is simply using a USB cable, and we've been using an application called Easy Installer, which you can download from the store onto your Android phone. And it seems to be fairly easy to use. It's free. So we've tried this out on a number of Android phones without any major problems. So all you really do is you copy the folder. Now the folder contains these things. Again, I don't know whether you can see that yet, or whether there's going to be a bit of a lag. So anyway, what's in front of me is the mobile sim folder. And what you see inside the mobile sim folder is the tabgame.apk. Oh, that's a bit of a stupid name, isn't it? We haven't really got a sensible name for the file yet. So that's the actual installable program. But the way that the program becomes a generic game framework that you can reuse for yourself is by reading in external files. And we're hoping to do more and more of this as we develop the game, so that ultimately the game itself is actually just a kind of framework. It doesn't have any assumptions in it at all, except those structural assumptions about games that I talked about in the first seminar. And you may recall that there was this idea of the narrative working through the teaser and the elaboration and the conflict and the resolution, and the game tree. And it's those things that are core to the architecture of the game. And then around that you can configure it in different ways. And the simplest configuration, which I'll focus on mainly, is how can I play the existing game in my location, which is perhaps the obvious question. And then the second part of it, which is a bit more complex but can be done, is how can I tailor the game to whatever I want? And actually that's not that difficult. So those are the things that we're going to be looking at. Okay, so we'll come back to what some of these files are a little bit later on. Let's go back to the wiki. So if you've installed this thing, then it's not really very usable, because if you install it as it is, if you just download the zip, put it on your phone, it's not going to work, because you're not at Massey University, which is where the default configuration is. So if you have a look at this user guide, you can find out how to configure it for yourself. So what I'm going to do is look at the user guide and then show you how it works. So again, I'm not sure how quickly this will appear on your screen, but I've just switched to the user guide, which you can download from the wiki. I'm looking at the original Word version. It's the same document. Make it a little bit bigger. Okay, so there's the link at the top for Easy Installer. Of course, if you're doing this on a mobile phone, then you don't need a URL for it. This is really just so you can go and look at it in advance. You can just browse the store and download it. And as I've just shown you, the folder that you have inside there, the folder is called Mobile Sim, and that's the folder that you copy to your phone. So just copy that directly to the phone, and then inside the folder is the game and all of the configuration files. So what do you need to do to make this work in your own situation? Well, the most important thing is that you need to decide where you want to play the game. And once you've decided where you want to play the game, you need to pick specific points and record their latitudes and longitudes, and I'll talk about that in a moment. And once you know the latitudes and the longitudes that you want for each location, you modify these two files, interviews1.xml and interviews2.xml. Now the modifications basically consist of replacing the existing latitude and longitude values with the ones that you want. So the example I've got here is Google Maps. in London. Let me do a slightly different version of that and show you what we've done at Massey. So let me go to Google Maps. Again, I'm not sure how quickly you'll see the screen change, but what I'm going to do is basically zoom into the Massey University campus in Auckland. It's actually up here on the North Shore, this is Auckland City down here. We're up in Albany, so we're just actually this is called North Shore City. It's used to be a separate kind of area of Auckland. Now we have the super city, we're all part of Auckland. Okay, I'm basically just going to zoom into the campus. Doing this hopefully slowly enough so that it's not completely out of sync. Okay, I'm going to switch to satellite. This is the Massey campus. Slightly old picture. This particular part of the campus has been grown from scratch really in the last 10 years or so, and maybe a bit longer than that, but there's new buildings going up all the time, so this is a slightly old picture. This part of the campus is quite small. Anyway, that's by the by. It's a great location for playing the game, because the idea of the game, as you may have gathered from previous presentations or documents, is that it's a sort of augmented reality game where you take the location that you've got and you pretend that it's a location that you want to simulate. So in our case, the various buildings of the campus simulate different parts of an organization. And the idea, of course, is that in order to play the game, the players have to move from location to location, and as they pass through the campus, they reach different buildings. They have virtual interviews with employees of a company. They learn about problems of the company. They look at virtual artifacts, and when they finish, they have to try and address some of the problems the company's facing. And in doing that, they have to apply higher level skills, synthesis, analysis, critical thinking, to identify all the issues that are going on and try and suggest some solutions to that. So let's say you wanted to play this game in your location. Let's say you were here in Massey. So what we basically do is just decide where we want the locations. Now, if you remember the game tree's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, well, kind of 6 locations that you need. So let's say I wanted to start here, and I wanted the study centre to stand in for the CEO's office. Just right-click, what's here, and this gives me the latitude and the longitude. Actually, that's latitude and longitude. And you can just copy that and paste it into your XML files. Actually, I've got what I hope will be a sort of handy layout that may help you to do this. So that all you need to do is choose your locations. So the second location I might want here. So the second location is it's quality assurance. So I might choose this building, where in fact my office is, and I might say what's here, and get a different value, and then I can record that and so on. So I can easily use Google Maps to choose my latitude and longitude, and then I can write it down. So really, what you might want to do is to, and I've put the information on this page about using the latitude and longitude, and then I've made a suggestion about how you might lay out the game. So the idea is that you need this kind of shape. This matches the game tree that appears in the document that explains the idea of the game. So the game tree is we have the first location, which is where the first interview occurs, and you can see I've placed this example in Trafalgar Square. So you need the locations to be far enough apart so that they don't overlap in terms of GPS location. So you don't want them too close together. On the other hand, you don't want them too far apart, because the purpose of the game is not to spend an awful lot of time walking. The purpose of the game is to spend enough time between locations to give you time to kind of reflect and feel that you are moving through a virtual environment. And of course, what you ideally want to do is pick locations that stand in for the buildings in the organization. But if you don't have buildings handy, then any location, of course, will do. You do have to have somewhere to put the physical artifacts. And as I say up here on the document, I wouldn't suggest you try doing it in a place like Trafalgar Square because of this issue that you have to put the physical artifacts somewhere. So first interview here would be with the CEO, and then you need to choose a location for the second interview, which is with quality assurance. Now the way the game is written is that there's two different versions, and when you start it up there's a player 1 or a player 2 option. So the idea is that you send people out in pairs, one person chooses player 1, the other chooses player 2, and when they get past the second interview they split up. So if you think about the game tree, teaser, elaboration, then we have this conflict escalation, and the idea is that one player goes in one direction and the other player goes in the other. So you have to choose two different locations, and we've called these 3A and 3B in the interview files. And the idea is they get different stories, then they come together for interview 4, which is the where the shop floor is, where the production facility is, and then finally they go for another final wrap-up interview. So you have to choose a tree that looks a little bit like this, where you've got one step, then they split, then they come back together, and then they come to a final position. And as I say, not too close together, not too far apart, and the locations need to be somewhere where you can put the physical artifacts. So what I've suggested is this little game tree. So if you want to have a go at preparing this game, you might want to print this out and write on it, or do an electronic version, doesn't really matter. Just record the latitude and longitude for each place, and then it's very easy to kind of remember and come back to. Whereas if you just paste them into the XML files, it all gets a bit confusing. So here, hopefully this will be a little bit of a help for you to fill this in, and it also reminds you what those interviews are. Of course, this is the interviews that we've provided. You can change them if you want, and completely change who's doing the interviews and what they say and what questions they ask. That's entirely up to you. Once you've done that, you then need to edit the interview files. Now the absolute minimum edit that you need to do is the latitude and the longitude of each of the interviews. So the first interview, interview ID 1, is the CEO, Jeffrey McCall, who you meet at the management office, and you specify the latitude and the longitude in the XML file. Now you can leave all of the rest of it behind. I mean, you don't have to touch any of this if you don't want to. The thing you have to remember is that there are two interview files, interviews 1 and interviews 2. I'm going to open this up in TextPad. Hopefully the recording will keep up with me. TextPad. This is interviews 1, and you can see that it's got interview 1, interview 2, interview 3, interview 4, interview, well, we call it 99. This gives us some flexibility to put extra ones in between if we want to. This file is exactly the same as the other one, except for interview 3, which is where the two players go to different places. This isn't the best way of organising the files, having duplicated info. Maybe something we should look at, but at the moment that's the way it works. So you'll notice that in this case this is the marketing interview in interviews 1, but if I open up interviews 2, you can see that interviews 3 here is interview 3 here is research and development. Otherwise the two files are identical, but at the moment, and this is one of the, I say it's a work in progress, you will have to replace the latitude and longitude exactly the same in both files for interviews 1, 2, 4 and 5, and choose different latitude and longitude for interview 3. The big task for us actually moving forward is to remove all of this hand editing and provide a desktop tool so that you can do all of this very, very easily. Yeah, that's something that we're just starting as a project at the moment. But if you want to use the game at the moment, those are the things that you need to do. Simply modify the latitude and the longitude in interviews 1 and interviews 2. And you don't need to do anything else at all, and then the game will work where you are. There's a couple of things that you can also configure if you want to. There's a config.txt file. It's got an initial latitude and longitude. That's where the initial map will center. It's not that important because as soon as your GPS kicks in, it will jump to where you are. But if you want it to open up with a sensible map that shows where you expect to be, you can change that initial latitude and longitude. So that's where you might want the players to start, which is before they get to the first interview. The zoom level is the Google Maps zoom, and you can change that if you're unhappy with the initial zoom level that you get on the screen. Wouldn't worry about some of these values here. They're just kind of defaults and they're not really sensible to mess with. You can change the scoring of the checkboxes at the end, which are choosing the main issues the company is facing. I have to say I think they're a bit arbitrary at the moment, and I think we need to think a bit more carefully about what we expect the students to highlight and why they get different scores. The other thing that you may well want to configure is this buildings entry. You might wonder what this is all about. One of the augmented reality features that we've got in the game is that as you move around the area, you get little floating labels over the buildings that tell you what they are, because if you remember the sort of concept of the game is that you're in a location and you're trying to make it stand in for a different location. And so these things pop up on top of the buildings as you walk around, showing you, for example, that you're now at the management office or you're going to the quality assurance department and so on. And you can see again that these have latitude and longitude values. These, of course, would be the same ones as the relevant interview. So if you wanted to set the management office latitude and longitude, that will be the same location as interview 1. So you can take these values directly off your game tree entries. They don't have to be different. They're the same. If you don't change these, it doesn't stop the game working, but you won't see the augmented reality labels floating over the buildings as you walk around. That's probably all I need to talk about, actually, in terms of configuring the game yourself. Let me just go back to my Zeek screen. Okay, so I see there's just in case there was anybody there, which there isn't, so I shall just carry on. I set this up as a half-hour session, so it's a fairly short session. So what I just will wrap up with is, if you want to try and do the configuration more ambitiously, and that is, if you like, design your own game and use the structure of this software as a game designer, what can you do? Well, there's a number of things that you can do, in fact. One thing you can do is replace the interviews. So, for example, inter1.mp4, this is me pretending to be Jeffrey McCall. So there's an interview there. Now, word of warning, if you decide you want to change the interviews, you are going to be changing the whole game. So if you wanted to make the game different and you wanted to change the interviews, that's fine, but they tie up with the artifacts and they tie up with the questions. So the artifacts, he's just talked about the newspaper article, which is this one. It also appears on the MobiMOOC webpage as one of the examples. So in the interview, he talks about this newspaper article. This is the physical artifact that you stick up on the wall or in the foyer or somewhere around the location that you send the students to. This is kind of an important part of the game because it makes a concrete link between the virtual things going on the phone and the physical things in the environment. So these physical artifacts are important. And if you change the interviews, of course, you have to change the artifacts. You also need to go into those XML files and change the text as well. So if I open up Interviewers 1 again, you can see that there are questions that the students have to answer with answers and suggested scores, and these scores are meant to reflect the appropriateness of the questioning. So part of the critical thinking aspect of the game is you get to ask one question, so you can choose which question to ask, and you get scores depending on which question you ask. So if you change the video, you change the artifact, you have to change the questions, you have to change the answers, you have to change the scores. So those are all things that you'd have to consider if you were going to do some serious reworking of the game. And in fact, there's another aspect of the config text file, which is this one at the end. There's an open question. At the moment it says, what are your thoughts about why Kiwi Mobile is facing difficulties? What do you think they could do to address the problems? And of course, if you change the game again, that final open question will need to be recorded. There's one final word of warning. The game as it stands sends test data up to our server. So bear that in mind, and that's purely, we're using that just for evaluation. All it does is it gathers anonymous usage data, and one of the things it picks up is what people type into that box. So as a sort of information transparency admission, I suppose, not quite sure how to phrase it, the current game is writing stuff to a test server. So if you just use it out of the box, you will be sending anonymous data to our server, which is set up purely to record game activity for research purposes. So if you don't like that possibility, don't use it at the moment. Wait till I've got the source code up there on SourceForge, and you can change that and point to your server or disable that functionality or whatever. Okay, I think I've stopped sharing my screen. After last experience, I got no idea what anybody might have seen or how well related what I was saying was to what you were seeing. But hopefully that was of some value to you. I hope some of you will look at this recording and have a look at the software and maybe have a go at trying out the game, configuring your own game. And if you have any thoughts about the design or anything, please let me know. Okay, we're almost at the end now of my half an hour, so I'd just like to say thanks to anybody who watches the recording, and if you wanted to contact me about the game in any way, please do so.